Okay. Just for your information, the recording will be shared on maybe social media and YouTube. So that's yeah. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. We are very excited and happy to welcome you all in this first JOGL live session. This is for us an experimentation, and we hope we're going to have a lot of feedback from you on this. Let me share my screen to briefly introduce you to what is a JOGL live. Oops. It would be better to start with the first slide. So today we're so happy to have as the first JOGL Live event to host the Quantified Flu project. To give you a bit of background, this is under the framework of the Open COVID-19 initiative, which is a program held by JOGL in response to the COVID-19 crisis. With the JOGL Live events, we try to spend 1 hour live with a project in order to provide and give more visibility to this project and get you a chance, members of this crazy community, to learn more about what they do and maybe start some collaboration. So it's really like an open moment where everyone has like the opportunity to exchange and maybe seek for avenue for collaboration. So hopefully at the end of this call, this 1 hour and maybe shorter if things are going well, we'll have some new collaborations. You'll learn more about some very nice projects. So yeah, and maybe if you have a project, we can do that for you one time. I don't know if some of you are new to JOGL. I just wanted to give you a bit of background on what Just One Giant Lab is and basically where are you landing. So Just One Giant Lab, and we have Just One Giant Lab CEO here, Thomas Landrin, is a collaborative platform powered by more than 4,000 people belonging to this open and distributed community across the globe. There's a very nice map that Leo, one of our co-founders, did here. We're really trying to be as distributed as possible. So who belongs to that community? It's students, researchers, data scientists, designers. Everyone is working hand in hand to advance projects, whether it's research or innovation in an open science framework, and that are aligned with SDGs. So I'm gonna stop right here and encourage you to check out the JOGL website, as well as, if my computer allows, the JOGL platform, which basically enable any project leaders to come and share information about that project, but most importantly, share their needs. And I think this is what the members of the Quantified Flu project are going to do today, is also talk about their needs and how you can, as members of the community, help them address them. All of this is kind of catalyzed by what we call program and challenges. It's basically our way at JOGL to put a little bit more efforts, thanks to our partners and coordination teams, to make these projects possible and help them the best way we can. So my name is Camille, and I am the JOGL program coordinator. And without, I'm losing my English, but I'm just going to let the mic to Bastian. I think, Bastian, you're going to be the one pitching. And if you have questions, please write them in the chat. Don't forget to mute your microphone. And Bastian, we are all ears.
Well, I guess I go back to the welcome and introductions maybe, so we can just introduce the speakers first.
Thank you. Long day.
Let me look at,
It's 8
I
p.m.
know.
here. We spend the day together with Bastian, so he knows. Thank you,
Yep, we've been
Bastian.
working on a paper all day together, sitting next to each other, next to this beautiful plants in the background of Camille. That's why I know how tired she is. So, hey everyone, I'm Bastian. I'm a research fellow at the Center for Research and Interdisciplinarity here in Paris. And I'm also the director of research for Open Humans. And I've been working together with Matt and with Gary for many years now, and have been working at Open Humans, I think, since about 2017, I think, when I joined. And we've been really interested in doing self-research and participatory research together. And I let Matt introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Mad. I'm Mad Ball, and I'm executive director at Open Humans. Open Humans has been around for a while as a nonprofit that started with trying to help people access and share data with group projects. And we've moved towards wanting to support communities to do their own projects, and then to individuals doing their own projects, because that individual focus and value is where open source starts, because people create something for themselves, and then more and more people realize how relevant that is. And Quantified Flu has arisen in this context. And so that's a bit about Open Humans, which really focuses on personal data and helping people access and use their personal data in individual and collective ways. And with that, I'll pass it to Gary.
Hi, I'm Gary. I'm the founder of Quantified Self, which is a international collaboration of users and makers of self-tracking tools who are interested in learning about themselves using their own data. We call that personal science. It's using our great half-millennium legacy of science, but directed by your own questions and using your own observations. I have been a long time user of Open Humans, and Open Humans has been some infrastructure behind some participatory research projects that we've done over the course of the last years. And I'm also a collaborator and a board member of Open Humans, and now working closely with Matt and Bastian on how to provide frameworks for thinking about your own data. Frameworks meaning things like visualizations and analytical toolkits that can be shared from user to user, even if their question is different. So we focus on the community approach to the methods and the processes and the workflows, rather than aggregating at the level of the generalizable question. And we can get more into that in our talk. Thank you for organizing this.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to meet you, and I can't wait for people to get to know more about Open Humans and Quantify Yourself. Bastian, it is all yours.
Okay, now it's time to share the screen. Let's see. There we go. And I hope you can see the slides. Okay. So yeah, a brief introduction to Quantified Flu. So the real big question that we are trying to answer for us is whether these wearables many of us are wearing, be it an Apple Watch or one of those Oura rings or a Fitbit, can help us warn us when we are falling sick. And actually the project idea came out of one of our own community calls that we do with Open Humans every Tuesday. By now at 7 p.m. Paris time, we are coming together, and I'm glad to see that actually Kate is here, because I think Kate was one of the people who started the whole question, asking like, can we use our data now during the pandemic to learn about ourselves? And so during the call, we brainstormed a bit, and I made some data visualizations for my own times when I fall sick, which we can see here. So there's like 3 events when I've fallen sick, and each of the red lines tells you when I've fallen sick. And you can see how my temperature is measured by the Oura Ring wearable, and my resting heart rate actually increases. So there seems to be some potentially interesting signal in it based on the N of 1 of me. And then we figured out that let's do some research into this, and could actually see that it's at least not only me. So actually just posted, I think around the same time as we had the question, we saw this blog post by someone from Finland. Petri posted about how he actually noticed that he was having coronavirus based on the Oura ring he was wearing, because he had like an elevated temperature, and like all the other measurements told him that his readiness was really low, which is a combined metric of how well you sleep, your physical or respiratory. There were like signals in it. And this effect is at least known already that it works well on a group level. So if you look at population-wide data, you can predict something. And the example here is this white paper that was published by Evidation, I think it's called. And they made like this large-scale study where they had thousands of people with wearables, which they could use for influenza surveillance, using the wearable devices, where they could predict a few days before people actually noticed falling sick that there were symptoms in the physiological data collected by it. And of course, we are not the only ones to do this, and I will pass it off to Gary to show us some of the examples and what other people are doing with wearables.
Thank you. So I'll just start by saying that this idea that you can use your own personal data to predict sickness onset has been around for 50 years. And I've done some research into the background of this idea, and it first appears in a peer-reviewed journal literally almost exactly to the month 50 years ago today, but that was emerging from the elite fitness community. So this is a technique of measuring heart rate in particular, using to predict kind of your overall wellness in advance of feeling any sickness. And also there's extensive anecdotal evidence from forums, and you can see that the knowledge is out there in the world. And I think that that's really important to note. There is kind of a popular work of knowledge creation that's gone on, but it was never really integrated into the scientific toolkit. And the reason was that the context of these measurements was highly personal. So it was never really very easy to recruit a bunch of subjects and get them to measure themselves in a really reliable way so that you could get to individual level sickness prediction. And then, of course, those of us who've been involved in doing self-measurement have noticed that the wearables technology provides a much more convenient and reliable way to take these measurements. And one of the authors on that paper that Bastian just showed, Ernesto Ramirez, was the program director at Quantified Flu for many years before he went to Evidation. So basically there's a pipeline from popular and knowledge into the scientific community. Now today we have this sense in the scientific community that wearables, quote, warn of COVID-19. So there's multiple academic projects attempting to refine this capacity with major research institutions, major wearables companies, and it's producing this wave of hope and hype. So there have already been announcements that wearables can predict COVID-19 symptoms up to 3 days in advance with 90% accuracy. Now, the question, of course, is what does 90% accuracy mean? It doesn't mean what most people will take it to mean, which is a warning of COVID-19 infection that you get is a 90% chance of being correct. That's very much not what it means. And in fact, we won't take our time to do the analysis, but any positive warning you get of COVID-19 infection from a wearable is very much more likely to be a false positive than a true positive. And we can deal with some of that in the questions if we want. But for the person attempting to learn about themselves, the number one issue they have as they encounter this research that shows you can predict COVID-19 infection is, what does this warning mean to me? How likely is it that I am going to get sick? And there's some questions that arise, like, well, if it is, how do I tell whether it's a false positive or a true positive? What if it's actually a false positive, but it's warning me of something important that's not COVID-19? So what would be considered a false positive in the scientific community might actually be very valuable information for an individual user. What if it's a device problem? How do I take into account the other kind of things that might be confounding this measurement? Like maybe I have circadian cycles that are influencing my biometrics. Maybe there are other biological cycles like ovulatory cycles that are influencing it. Maybe there's other conditions, underlying conditions. And this shows us the constraints that the mainstream scientific approach has for individuals seeking to understand themselves. None of these projects, these academic plus wearable research projects, provide ongoing real-time feedback to participants. They don't share the data. More importantly, they don't provide any support for individuals to ask their own questions of this data. Everything that these projects is producing is squeezed through what I call PR squared. And that's this combination of peer review and public relations. And I think for us, concerned with popular and individual knowledge making, that's a kind of toxic equation, because the PR part of it, the public relations part of it, comes first, and it gets you all interested and kind of maybe primes you with some misconceptions. But then the actual valid knowledge comes long time afterwards, when the peer-reviewed articles are released. So our projects are operating in this kind of in-between space, after the PR, but before the peer review. And I'll pass it over to Matt to talk about how.
Yeah, so to add to this compare and contrast with other projects, I like to emphasize that this project is not attempting to do epidemiology. It might indeed have data within it that could arguably be used for those purposes, but epidemiology projects imply a very large set of people, which means that you're working with the original device maker and generating large-scale answers on average. This project is focusing on that individual value for individual that people can have for themselves, and rapidly confronting what you might see in sort of an epidemiology peer-reviewed statement to individual value. Part of the reason to do something like this is to think about that individual value, is to think about why open source communities thrive and are of interest to people, is because we don't just want to be exploited to give all of our stuff to someone else and then maybe have them publish a paper in a year or two, but to be able to use it ourselves and to be able to improve it for ourselves. So a lot of what you're going to see is going to be stuff about producing visualizations that individuals can use, and those are things that people have been contributing to. And so this is community driven as well as community launched. And thinking about this not as you contributing to Quantified Flu so that Quantified Flu produces something later, but being part of a collective set of people that are learning together and being part of a community that is doing this together. There is data, collective data that can be used to generate more than just individual insights. And so individuals that are participating in Quantified Flu can also opt in to making their data publicly available, which is really helpful for people who are prototyping new analyses and visualizations, and creates that potential for learning beyond that n=1 scale to understand how we can use this data. And with that, I think I'll pass it back to Bastian.
Thanks. Then I will give a brief overview of how Quantified Flu works in practice. So we have support for a lot of these different wearables. So if you're, regardless whether you're using a Fitbit, an Oura Ring, a Garmin device, any Apple Health or Google Fit compatible devices, the data you can actually import into OpenHumans or in Quantified Flu, which stores it into OpenHumans for you, where you have it stored in your own private data store, and you don't need to worry about anyone seeing all of the raw data that goes into Quantified Flu, even if you want to share some of the data later on. But then you can use this data for two purposes. And the first one is for doing, oops, for whatever reason, I can't press the button. There we go. So the first thing you can do is you can do ongoing symptom logging. So you can actually ask us to send you an email every single day. And in this email, there are two links. One is you report you have no symptoms, you are feeling completely fine. Then no symptoms will be reported. Or if you say you have symptoms, you are taken to a web page where you can enter some details of the different symptoms. And this data will then be stored alongside your wearable device data for the day. And you can then get nice visualizations, which we can see in a bit. And the second thing you can do is the same retrospective things that I showed in the very beginning, once we had our community call and discussed whether there's any interesting signal. If you remember when you've fallen sick in the past, you can go back and actually plot this data to see whether you have any generalizable knowledge for yourself, at least, that you can gain from it. But I think in the long term, the really interesting bit is the ongoing symptom logging. And what it gives you is like you get one of those nice graphs personalized for you. So you can see this nice heat map on the top that a contributor made, which basically gives you on the y-axis all the different symptoms that you report, and then the different days, and you see how bad your symptoms were on a given day. But really important is that you can also write basically a free text comment, and you let us know, or let yourself know, to remind yourself like why you reported something. And here's a very interesting example that I've picked, which is a person that says, well, I have a cough to report, but actually it's a smoker's cough because I've been smoking more since I'm out of work. And I think if you go back for this user's comments, you will see that he's actually out of work because of the pandemic. So now the pandemic starts, like he loses his job, and now he's sitting at home smoking more, and that's why he all of a sudden like smokes more and reports a symptom, which he didn't have before. And then on the bottom of it, you can actually compare this to the heart rate. In this case, the user is using a Fitbit, and you can see the heart rate over time for each of those days. And the blue bar actually gives you the standard deviation of the heart rate of all the data we've collected. So actually you can figure out whether any individual increase of the heart rate is interesting, or maybe it's increased, but it's still inside your normal level somehow. So this is something, if you start using Quantified Flu today, you can start creating this nice graph for yourself, and you can actually explore your data very easily. You don't need to do any coding or visualization. You can scroll through it in your browser. There's lots of hover tooltips and stuff, so you can actually explore your data in a lot of detail by just going through it. But of course, as Matt said, there's also the way to analyze the data collectively. So if you're a data scientist, we have APIs which give you access to all of this data. And if you're interested in looking at the aggregate of all the users that have made data public, that's possible too. And actually, a small example of this is what, for example, my undergrad interns that I had a couple of weeks ago did using the publicly available data, more or less at the start of Quantified Flu, which is why it's only 6 different data sets. But so they looked at when people are reporting symptoms of falling sick, how does the temperature and resting heart rate develop over time? And you can already see that the far left graph is the body temperature when people are falling sick. You can see that there's indeed an increase of the body temperature going on. And in the center, you see the resting heart rate as measured by the Oura ring. There seems to be also an effect, but then already if you just go to the people who are using Fitbits, the graph looks very differently, despite it more or less being the same number of people. And there you can't really see any increase. So that's already telling you that maybe not all of these devices might be super useful. And you can see how it's maybe that there's like, for individuals, it might still hold true. So I know, for example, that for my own Fitbit data, I did see an increase, but other people might not. So maybe the signal indeed is more personalized than we can envision. But so, as I said, we've been doing this since, I think we've started working on mid-March, and had like a first version of this in a very simple way at the end of March. And since then, we have added support for all of these different wearable devices instead of just 2 in the beginning. And so far, over 150 people have already started using Quantified Flu, and around half of them actually opt in into sharing. So if you're interested in the collective data, there's already quite a bit of data to play around, but also there are lots of individuals who are using it for themselves, which is a very nice and interesting split, I think. And of course, it's actually not just Gary, Matt, and me who've been doing this. So we had a lot of contributors, and I need to give a shout out to all of them. And I think given that we are on the JOGL live call, and the first person that we need to highlight is Luka Spaldi, who was an iOS developer from Poland, who contacted us, whom we found through the Open COVID Slack from JOGL. And he made the whole iPhone application that allows you to export data from Apple Health. So now we can support data from Apple Watches, but all other data sources that can deposit data in Apple Health as well. Then we had Carolina, who helped us to implement the Google Fit and the Garmin devices, so 2 more data sources. And Konstantin Botkin helped us to implement the Fitbit intraday data as well. So like basically many of the data sources were not done by either of us 3 here, but by individual contributors who just saw the project and wanted to help out. And the same is true for the data analysis and visualizations. Basil, he's an intern with me, but he spent now, I think, a month and a half already on making this really nice visualizations. And without him, Quantified Flu would be very boring to use for personal use because you can't see any of your data. And then also Ilona and Melvin helped a lot to actually start a first exploration of the collective data. So there's lots of ways to contribute to Quantified Flu, and there's 3 things how you can be involved. And the first thing you can do is just join us on Slack. If you're already in the Open COVID-19 Slack, then you can join the Project Quantified Flu channel. If you are not, you can join either there, or you can join the Quantified Flu channel in the Open Humans Slack, and they are linked to each other, so it doesn't really matter which one you use. You will find us either way. And of course, we invite all of you to actually join us on using Quantified Flu and learn individually and learn collectively. Like, there's lots of people posting on the Slack channel about what they've learned and brainstorming data visualizations and so on. And last but not least, a big ask we have for everyone here is to please share Quantified Flu with others so that more people get to use it, get to learn, and get to contribute data as well. And that's our very brief pitch.
Thank you, Bastian, Gary, and Matt. This is, yeah, like brief, but so complete and insightful, and also inspiring. So I have many questions, but I can definitely ask them later. I would like to encourage everybody here to use the raise your hand button if you'd like to make a comment or a questions, or to write it in the chat. So to use the raise your hand button, it's in the participants, and normally you have a little button with the waving. Maybe while you're writing questions, or could any of you 3 maybe tell us where you're going with this project? Because we have, like, you've tell us where this all coming from and the entire framework, and also where you're at now. Yeah, where are you? Where is that going? Where is this leading? And what would you need from other community members? I don't know who wants to answer this question. Yeah.
Bastian, I think in general you should answer unless you want one of us, Gary or me, to answer. So we have some great features now, especially with this ability to track your symptoms and visualize your activity trackers concurrently. One of the things that I think we could use is if there's someone who is interested in communications and sharing information about the project. We do have our hands full trying to improve features, and so anybody who feels like they have communicator abilities, who want to share the project with others, get onto social media and stuff, would be a great benefit. I'll pass it back to Bastian if he has other thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think that's the main need we have right now, is having people that help us spread the word about Quantified Flu. So we're doing the best we can, but as Matt said, we are all also trying to improve the website itself, and maybe we are not the most best social media people, let's say, to actually get out there regularly and post updates. And if someone wants to help us on this communication front, just to even communicate with the members, we have been, I think, particularly bad about updating people that there are new features, for example. So if someone wants to write newsletters or Facebook posts or make tweets, all of this would be super useful to us.
There's some interesting, oh, sorry, I'm just going to jump in and say there are some interesting, as you look at the members who have publicly shared things, there's interesting potential vignettes that you could imagine someone who's interested in talking to those individuals and putting together communication of here's an example of one person's story of when they got sick and what their data told them. That's all stuff that we haven't had time to do. And so there's really some opportunities there, and communicating with the members and then sharing those stories. Back to Bastian, sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say one other thing, or rather in terms of what's next, I think we still have some ideas of what to improve on the website. So one thing that we've been discussed, and I know Matt has already started working on this, making customizable symptom reports. So for now, there's a set of symptoms that we thought is interesting, but maybe people using Quantified Flu have like symptoms they would be more interested in, they want to add to like their daily reporting. That's one thing. And of course, there's like, just I think between last week and today, we implemented a new data type as well. So for example, it turned out that respiratory rate thing. So we added this since a few days as well. So now you can explore your respiratory rate as well. So I think just increasing the types of features and which kind of variables is like on the technical side, what we want to implement and what to improve upon. And Gary, did we miss anything?
Well, the hook to analyses and notebooks. If we do have a rich sort of support with on-the-fly virtual machines for using Jupyter notebooks for analyses. So if there's anybody who can analyze data using Jupyter notebooks, that's also a way to tie in and create interesting value and share those analyses.
And I think we might have skipped in a way or gone too fast because we take it for granted the magical quality of the little community that's formed around Quantified Flu. And so maybe I'll just take 1 second, because I think there's a way in which even one additional person or two additional people participating in that community could actually put us over a certain threshold. And what I mean is, we already have a community in which people are creating Jupyter notebooks, frameworks for understanding their own data, mainly visualizations, that are shareable. And when we get into a community meeting, somebody can put up their data visualization and say, look, here is an illustration of my respiratory rate and my sickness incident. And somebody else at that very moment, who, if they're participating in Open Humans and Quantified Flu, can see their data inside that framework with a few clicks. This is a big aha moment, because this is a facility or a capacity for sharing frameworks that does not exist in the world, except to the extent that we're making it exist. And I think that we don't know where it will catch fire, right? What is the insight or the aha moment that may make hundreds or thousands of people who are using an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or any of the other tools that can feed data into Open Humans say, hey, wait a second, I want to see my own data in that framework. But that day, I think, is coming. And so we're, in a sense, trying to be as prepared as possible and to kind of blow on these flames and see if we can get this fire of knowledge making to spread. So if you have one of those wearables that you're using, if you have a Fitbit or an Oura Ring or an Apple Watch, and you want to start making insights or knowledge with that data, consider doing it with on Quantified Flu. And if you bring some technical skills to that community, you have a chance of really connecting them up to a broader system. That would be very, very helpful. And I really think we're still at the one person at a time phase. So every new contributor makes a huge difference at this phase of the work.
Thank you so much, Gary. It's true. Like I think I can relate to this. Like we are at a one contributor margin, let's say, because like when you meet, what I found fantastic in these communities is that you meet amazing people, and the serendipity of these meetings can actually create really quality collaboration. So yeah, if you'd like to be involved with Quantified Flu, just like please reach out. And I think it's also for me a call for like I'm for students, and also a question for you guys. I know like students, they're often shy about reaching out. I've personally experienced feeling a little bit not legitimate to be part of such a project. So what would you say to students who could maybe help you with analysis or help you in this process and who are listening?
Well, I think that the point is that we are happy over every single contributor, and like there is no contribution too small. So we had people who literally like started just doing a bit of fixing typos on the website or just improving the existing scripts a tiny bit to make them run faster. And like none of these were super complicated contributions, but they make all the difference to us nevertheless. So like no matter how little you think you can help us, we would be very happy about it either way. And it will help us a lot.
Bastian, you've been working with some students. Maybe just give an example or two.
Yeah, I mean, the visualizations of analyzing the group level data that I showed in the slides was done by students who were interning with me for basically, I think, 2 weeks. So they knew very basic data analysis skills, which they actually interned with me for like another week last year. So that's where they picked up figuring out how to make plots in the first place. And then they were like, can we do this again? I was like, yep, we have some interesting data for you. You can just go ahead. And then we just like, they came to the Open Humans community call, gave a really nice short presentation about what they learned in those 2 weeks and what they found out from the data. So there's plenty of ways to make an impact and actually help us understand the data people are collecting.
Great. I think Kathy Chen, sorry if I pronounce your name the wrong way, asked if some ways. Are there other ways, Bastians? I remember when we talked about it, you said that students who also do just like master time series, it would be an added value as well. I don't know if there is anyone here doing that. But if they're like, I just would like to encourage, if there are students here on this talk, what would actually you gain from participating to such a project? Like, just don't be shy. If you want to raise your hand or just like unmute yourself and speak up. It's a very open and horizontal process. So yeah. Anyone?
And I see there's at least one more question in the chat as well from Enrique about open hardware wearables. And I see Matt has already replied briefly, but maybe we can like enter the point a bit more. So yeah, there is the Bangle.js, which is completely open source. You can program it in JavaScript. And unfortunately, I don't have mine right here on this desk because it's in my office to wave it into the camera. But it allows you to like record data pretty simply, but it's, I think, out for less than half a year. And so far, the tricky issue is the algorithms to convert the optical sensor data into actual heart rate data. I've been playing around with it a bit, and the data quality is like my heart rate just while sitting at my desk, but moving my arm slightly goes from 40 beats per minute to 200 beats per minute, depending on how I hold my arm. So it's not there yet for using deeply, but this is another way you could actually contribute. So if you are someone who's into signal processing, like you can get the data from the device, you can like make a new algorithm and improve it. So there's like lots of ways that you can help. So on the off chance that there's any signal processing experts here who want to volunteer, this would be really great, because I would love to see an open source wearable being supported by Quantified Flu.
And if you improve Bangle.js or another open source wearable, it doesn't just feed Quantified Flu, it helps so many other projects and ecosystems. And that's the beauty of open source.
Actually, Matt, could you tell us a bit more about what are the other projects and what you do with Open Humans? Because Quantified Flu is a tiny part of it. And maybe people here would like to be, we're interested to hear about everything that you guys have been doing.
So I don't want to try to hit too many things, but one thing that Gary has mentioned in the chat that is also a really interesting part of Open Humans is our notebooks infrastructure, where we support people running Jupyter notebooks on data that they've connected to Open Humans. So what it enables is sort of making it very easy for someone to run an analysis someone else has written for their personal data on your own personal data, and like very rapid. So once you've connected your Apple Watch data through Open Humans, which keeps that data private, but has this link, you can spin up your own virtual machine and just in a click, run somebody else's analysis of heart rate data on your own heart rate and get a graph right away. And this happened live during a meeting, like a community call, where Richard's on this call, I think, and Richard had a notebook, and Bastian and I were like, well, let's click the link and see what our graph looks like. And so that personal value for data and having an ecosystem where people can just rerun analysis on their own data is something really exciting in Open Humans.
Do you want to do a quick demo? Because I think the aha effect is really just seeing it.
Okay. Yeah, let me see if I can try to get, I guess I'll get Richard's notebook open in the exploratory. And share.
Are you able to share? Yeah.
I've tried sharing. Am I sharing now?
Yeah.
I hope this is the right one. And so in the exploratory, what I can do is, Richard created this notebook, and I can go ahead and hit run notebook. Can you see the tab loading now? And I have to go through reauthorization here.
A little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. And this is Richard.
What I thought was cool about this was that, so I've been tracking my heart rate using the Apple Watch, and I've got data from about like a year, a little bit more than a year. And I noticed that my resting heart rate has changed quite a bit from last year to this year. But I don't know, is that an interesting observation? Is that, is this one of those things that happens? So part of what is useful about this is that I'm able in real time in a meeting like this to watch other people. And so we can look at MAD and how is that data different from mine? And it's a very powerful thing if you've got lots of people, because you can all just look at it in real time.
Yeah, so now this is run on my data. I'm trying to illustrate that these are different graphs. So you can see this graph here is different from this one. So now this has been run on my data. And actually, I noticed while we were talking during the meeting that it was only running for a portion of the year. And so I can go and edit the original code here. And hopefully this runs again. I have to run all. But I could look at this and in our meeting say, oh yeah, here's my version of the data. And I know that my data was higher in 2018 because I was pregnant. And that's known to happen. That's normal. And Richard could see like just whether someone else's graph had the same type of noise or what it looked like. And just ran, yeah, so you can see it here. That's my full year. So I edited the code right here on the fly while talking to you. And now I can see my full year of data, and you can see I gave birth rate here at the end of December, and my resting heart rate went down after that. So that's a live demo. I guess I should stop screen share. Hopefully that shows you the kind of magic of, Richard shared this. I actually can't code R at all. The best I could do was like edit one of the variables, but I could rerun an analysis that Richard had made on my own data and right away.
This looks amazing. Like, I want to do that. And I want to track my heart rate, like just right before meetings like this. I think we have a question. Yeah, Katarzyna, do you wanna reactivate your mic?
I was just clapping because it's really great, and the aha moment we had recently. So I'm leading Quality of Life Technologies Lab, where I would love to see Open Humans as a platform in which, where there is a specific example of somebody doing self-research, self-experimentation, that us having this wearables and having this passive data sets, and maybe requiring some additional active reported outcomes and through some app or Excel file or in some kind of pre-specified format that will be able to reproduce. So imagine you watch somebody's 10, 15 minutes show and tell talk, and it's like, oh, this is a great, I wonder how would I do that? Or I wonder if my data shows the same. And really some of this data is available because the streams are there. And then maybe there's some additional self-reports which would need to be added, and I would love to see this self-experimentation, and I'm going to contribute to this. I always promise now. It's going to come after summer. Yes, so thank you for this effort.
Yeah, I think that the reproducibility point is really relevant, because it's like super hard for people to, especially when it comes to personal data, to reproduce things easily. I think in a way it's even harder than in traditional academia, because there's like data standardization and formats and all these things, and especially just setting up your development environment just for making the plots. And I think I like to think of myself as generally a technical person, but I remember like lots of quantified self show and tells where they did even release all of their code open source somewhere on GitHub and was like, here's how you can do it yourself. And like, it always took like at least a day of work just to try to actually get it to run. And like, that's what we're trying to completely take out of the equation. Like if you have your data in Open Humans and someone makes a notebook, you are guaranteed that you can just run it on your data and you get your graph. That's the ultimate goal somehow, to like make reproducibility built into personal science.
I wanted to add to this that this is a very individual focused aspect of Open Humans, and to say that Open Humans has the ability for people to create group projects that people can share their data with as well, to create more, to go past that n=1 knowledge. The reason that it's so important and valuable to have this ability for individuals to start asking questions is for communities to create their own group projects. They really need to be able to start with being able to explore their own data, to come up with the ideas and problems that they want to solve, and then they might scale up to something larger. A lot of the conversations right now about finding value for our health data have implicit within them a very sort of top-down paternalistic approach, where we think, okay, here's my data, I don't understand it, I'm going to donate it for some greater good, and somebody else will solve the problems for me. And there's certainly power in that. I don't want to say that that approach is wrong, but there's a lot of innovation and questions that remain unanswered, and communities that end up being disempowered by that dynamic of needing to just hand your data to someone else. So, so while these notebooks demonstrate that individual data exploration capacity, the intent there is that the notebooks are open source, and that they may create questions that are posed, then can be translated to larger projects.
And maybe I'll just follow up on that by saying, one of the really nice things about this infrastructure is that larger projects is a kind of, can scale continuously. So larger doesn't mean like, okay, now the project is funded and we're going to go out and recruit a few hundred participants and take them through, whatever human subjects research ethical review is required. It works very differently. It can start with one person and it can scale to, say, 3 people, or it can scale to 10 people. And I do think for those who are on this call who are in academic scientific research, this terrain of human subjects research using small groups is potentially extremely fruitful. And we've seen it already function for scientists, that they're able to make generalizable discoveries and have them published in peer-reviewed journals using relatively small groups of people. So this is leverage, and maybe somebody wants to take advantage of it.
So
yeah, I think there's a misconception that you need really large numbers, but one person can act as their own control in a variety of ways. And when you have a very small group of people, those people are highly engaged. And so they're going to collect data on a scale that you just couldn't get, and a diversity that you couldn't have gotten on a larger scale.
And maybe if I could just say, we used Open Humans infrastructure for testing changes in blood cholesterol over relatively short cycles. And we did that with under 25 participants. We showed that every single participant crossed through cardiovascular risk categories based on time of day alone, independent of diet, and published that article in the Journal of Circadian Rhythms as the first human subjects research measured at any degree, anything like that degree of kind of temporal density. We measured as often as once an hour. And so this was a very striking advance, scientific advance over what had previously been published. And it was done really, there was one academic scientist involved and 24 very empowered participants. And it was done over the course of months. So that's pretty accelerated.
this is fascinating. Coming from the public health research world, I am amazed. And actually, I'd like to ask you, like, if people have, like, whether they're from the research world, whether they're students or just like really have a lot of question about their health, where can they go? Like right now, where should they start? And also, is there, I know you have a forum. Could you say a bit more about it? Like, how can they connect with other members and just like form groups and start doing their own projects?
Yeah, so as I already said earlier, we do have a Slack where there's like lots of people around, which is like a good way to get started, I would say. And then we also do have a forum which is linked from the Slack email, I think, where you can find like the posts where people have like longer self-research questions. So I think we briefly mentioned that we had a self-research project where people were starting their own research projects about themselves. And there were lots and lots of people who made posts about like keeping a diary basically of how their project is going. So there's a lot of inspiration to be found there already. And also lots of support. So like I remember lots of people giving feedback about like, oh, you could try tracking it like this or helping with the data analysis. So people do already help each other there. So, but the entry level would be, I guess, the Slack. So find us there and we can link you to everything else.
Yeah, the Slack is the best. We also have we have calls Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays focus on community stuff, including Quantified Flu, and Thursdays on self-research projects. But Slack.
Okay, great. Maybe, are you okay for having one question from Archaea before we wrap up? Okay.
Sure.
Mike is yours.
Hi there. Hi, my name's Bastian Greshake. I'm very new to this industry, to health tech. My background's actually in different things, drones actually, as random as that is. But I mean, I've always been extremely fascinated, and you know, been actually, especially with biometrics and one's own biometrics and so on. I think it's a treasure trove just sitting there, you know, when the time is right to throw up some pretty incredible insights. I mean, I'm 42 years old and I have 2 kids, and you know, my body's changing, and I know that. But the thing that I find, you know, when I try to talk about this to industry in general, is always that, okay, it's so what? It literally is that the response I get is so what? You know, so you're tracking yourself, you're waiting for this aha moment to happen. And meanwhile, the industry is kind of like powering on with tracking chronic diseases and this, that, and the other. So it just seems like while we know it's important for people to take control of their own health and do something about it, it doesn't seem to move on from there. So instead of trying to, you know, do academic projects, do you find that it's actually quite difficult to make this into something which is more of a global scale and a movement that could actually amount to something in the future, if that makes any sense? So I think I'm just kind of struggling to find how to find a way to scale it into the, the commercial field and get more people engaged, get funding from the big companies. Otherwise, it just remains small. And I think there's so much potential in what's happening here.
Can I just jump right in and say, obviously we can't get deeply into that in the time that we have, but I'm also obsessed with that question. And I welcome you to just get in touch with me. I mean, this is life's work for us, but the last 4 or 5 years have been very focused on how to take what's clearly a powerful knowledge-making tool and scale it so that everybody can benefit. So yes, I mean, this is a very important question, and I would love to talk with you about it.
Thank you. I mean, how could I reach you? Is there an email or something that I could
I'll put it in the
potentially...
chat right now. It's really simple, and definitely get in touch.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Archaea, you can also put your name and contact in the agenda, so we can just like provide a follow-up email to everybody who wants that and be in touch.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. I think we can wrap it up. I can't thank you enough for this amazing first JOGL Live. I hope it has been as insightful for everybody as it has been to me. Just like, please get in touch. You have all the Bastian, Matt, and Gary's info in the agenda. And oh, Caroline is actually wonderful. We have a small habit. We take pictures before. I don't like pictures, so I tend to forget this part. But I'd like to ask you to put your camera on. We'll do a screen share, not a screen share, a screen capture, and then we can, yeah. All right. So I need to open this. Okay, Stanley, Sophie, Aaron, if you want to put your camera on. And then I can count down to 3 and we can say hi or whatever. Or if you want to do crazy faces, feel free. All right. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hey.
Hey.
Oh, good. Thank you so much, everyone. It was wonderful having you. Let's keep in touch. There is the Open Human Slack, the Open COVID-19 Slack. Also, for the one who are not on JOGL, come on JOGL. We're a big open community doing great things. And yeah, stay tuned. Looking forward to see collaboration between you. Like, we want new projects and new data. So yeah, thank you everyone, and have a great evening or day, depending on where you are. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye bye.